This is BBC World News. I'm Rajat Ahmed. Our top stories. Donald Trump's former deputy campaign manager pleads guilty to conspiracy and lying to the FBI. The bombardment continues on the ground in Syria as the UN Security Council delays a crucial vote on a ceasefire. Hello and welcome. A former senior advisor to President Trump has pleaded guilty to conspiracy and lying to investigators who are examining Russian influence in the 2016 presidential election. Reports say other potential charges against Rick Gates were dropped in return for his cooperation. Our correspondent Peter Bose reports. Let's take a look at some of the other stories making the news now. A suicide bomber has blown himself up in the Afghan capital, Kabul. Officials say at least one person was killed in the attack in the diplomatic area of the city. Several other people were injured. Militants have launched several deadly assaults in recent months, including the storming of a luxury hotel and a raid on an Afghan military compound. Several US companies have cut ties with the National Rifle Association following last week's Florida shooting in which 17 people were killed. They include car rental firms and a computer software company. Now, as the world waits for intervention in the fighting in eastern Ghouta, a vote on a UN Security Council resolution calling for a humanitarian ceasefire in Syria has been postponed again. It's now expected to take place this evening, but there has been deadlock since Thursday, with Russia demanding amendments. In the past week, more than 460 people have been killed as Syrian government forces continue their bombardment of eastern Ghouta, a rebel-held suburb of Damascus. Here's our Middle East editor, Jeremy Bowen. The US Treasury has warned those who trade with North Korea do so at their own peril, announcing new sanctions. It said any company that helped to fund Pyongyang's nuclear program would lose the right to do business with America. Our Seoul correspondent Stephen McDonnell explained why America is calling this the toughest US sanctions yet.
What it is this is a list of some 56 companies, individual ships and also people, and those on that list are effectively blacklisted from doing any business with US entities or people. So it becomes illegal if you're a US company or even a US citizen to have anything to do with those who are on the list. And what this is all about is trying to stop North Korea from circumventing the UN sanctions. What it's apparently doing at the moment is parking ships out in the middle of the ocean, and there'll be a ship which has lied about where it's delivering its cargo, and I guess a North Korean ship, and they pull up next to one another and transfer oil or coal or other prohibited substances, and then in that way they're getting around the UN sanctions. And the US government says it has satellite imagery of this type of activity. So they're trying to really turn the screws on North Korea by shutting down these companies. What I'm not 100% clear on is why it would necessarily hurt them, because some of them, well, they could possibly just get around having anything to do with the US and just make a lot of money in having their dealings with North Korea. But apparently any US dollar transactions are going through these banks that are somehow connected to US banks, etc. And so people say it is going to make it tough even for them.
Stephen, we're seeing this rapprochement between the North and South at the Winter Olympics. Have we had any reaction from either side to these new sanctions?
No reaction yet, but I think what we would expect from the North is condemnation, and what we would probably expect from South Korea is that the South Korean government has its own set of sanctions on North Korea, and usually it just follows suit. So the US Treasury issues a list of here are these entities or companies, we're sanctioning them, and normally the South Korean government just goes along with it. What is going to be very interesting, though, is the Chinese government's response, because some of these companies, these shipping companies on this list, are in China, and in the past Beijing has been infuriated by this, saying that sort of unilateral sanctions should not be imposed, especially on our companies. Basically, the Chinese government thinks everything should be done through the UN and not by individual countries. So I'm sure they'll be having something to say about it when the Foreign Ministry has its regular press briefing on Monday.
Much more coming up on BBC World News.